Good evening and welcome to the Recovery Out Loud Burke series. My name is Yvonne. I'm a person in long-term recovery, and I'm so glad to be back with you again. It's Tuesday, September 8th. I'm hoping that all of you had a blessed and restful Labor Day weekend. As part of National Recovery Month, as you're aware, we're coming to you virtually. Usually we like to be together physically in person to share with you about pathways in recovery. But because of social distancing, we wanted to take care of ourselves as well as encourage you to take care of yourself. And so we're bringing to you a speaker series live. And you'll be hearing tonight from a very special lady who's going to talk a little bit about her journey with her family, and more specifically give you some information about Al-Anon. This is live. We are streaming live this evening. And so we encourage you that if you have any questions to learn more about Al-Anon, that you please use the communications on Facebook Live, and then about quarter of the hour, we're going to wind down the speaker, and then we'll kind of read those questions so that she can respond. I'm sure you're tired of hearing enough of me, so without further ado, I want to introduce to you Jen. Jen comes to us, and so we're so thankful for Jen and her desire to just kind of reach out to us and share a little bit about Al-Anon. So I'm going to let Jen take over.
Okay, thank you, Yvonne. I do want to just give a little information about myself, and I actually was supposed to be part of the steering committee for RISE when it started, and I am still on their email list to get their updates. I ended up not being able to make the meeting time. And actually that was because we were starting a new Al-Anon meeting in the city of Reading at the time. So anyway, I haven't been able to actively participate in the RISE Recovery Center establishment, but I was grateful when you asked me, Yvonne, to speak. My sponsor always told me not to say no to service, so I said I would speak. And I am a grateful member of Al-Anon. I want to give you a little bit of history. When we share our stories in Al-Anon, we're told to tell what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. And for those of you who may not be familiar, Al-Anon is a 12-step program of recovery. It's the sister program to Alcoholics Anonymous. So basically, when the founder of AA got his meeting started many years ago, it seemed that a lot of men ended up meeting in the home, and the wives went to another room. And the wife of the founder of AA actually started up Al-Anon meetings for friends and family members who have been affected by alcoholism. So I want to give a little bit about my family history, and I do that because I do think it's important to look at where we've come from. And when Yvonne asked me to speak, I always feel like I have to explain this part, that I myself did not grow up with active addiction, and I don't currently live with active addiction. And for a long time, I felt like that meant that I wasn't as qualified, if you will, to be an Al-Anon. However, I have a family history of alcoholism. I have a parent who is an adult child of two alcoholic parents. So two of my grandparents were alcoholic. I don't think I knew that until I was maybe in my 30s. That speaks a little bit about how we were about keeping secrets and making sure that things looked okay on the outside. I I had an aunt who was an alcoholic. And basically, what happened is addiction is a family disease. And it not only is in the family that the active addiction is occurring in, it trickles down from generation to generation. And if there isn't treatment along the way, if everyone involved doesn't get help, then the suffering can easily continue. I grew up as the oldest of 3 children. And I have relatively good memories of my childhood. I was a very quiet and shy child, very introverted. I remember being often afraid and feeling anxious, especially of changing and changes, new experiences. I grew up with a parent also who had some issues with depression and anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder. So there was a lot of anxiety in our home. Again, I don't know that I really recognized that's what was going on at the time, but there was sort of this underlying fear and anxiety based environment. So I went to high school, and when I think back at school, I kind of think that I just tried to do good. I felt like I had to do good, and that somehow made me good. I graduated high school and went to college for a career in the medical field because that was a good thing to do, help people. I really had no idea what I wanted to do. Went away to college. You know, I did what you were supposed to do. I I went to college. I got married. We bought a house. Started working. I don't have any children, and there always just felt like there was something missing inside of me. I have heard it said or described as a hole in the soul. I've heard many speakers, particularly AA speakers, say that they had a hole in their soul, and that really fit for me. I started therapy for depression back in 1996. I have been in and out of therapy for many years trying to deal with depression. And it was always, I thought, a problem outside of myself causing me to be depressed. It was my marriage. It was my job's not right. It was, I'm just not happy. I don't know why. It was my family. It was always something. So I was in and out of therapy for many years, and that was greatly helpful for me in a lot of ways. Um, I did a lot of changing who I was to fit in with who I was with at the moment. I didn't feel like I, first of all, really knew myself, who I was truly, and second of all, that I could truly be myself. So I sort of just changed to please the people that I was around. And one day I was at work. I work in a medical field. I was working with a patient, and she is a longtime member, was a longtime member of AA. And one day she said to me, I think I'm codependent with my boyfriend. And I said, what does that word mean? I had heard the word codependent, but I didn't really understand it or know what it meant. And she recommended a book to me, which I read, and I knew that that was what I had, was codependent. I have one definition here that says a codependent person is one who has let another person's behavior affect him or her and who is obsessed with controlling that person's behavior. And again, I didn't realize any of this was going on at the time. But when I read this book, I really connected with codependency as a problem. And a lot of times in the Al-Anon program, that word is brought up. The Al-Anon disease is codependency. Often you will hear people say. And what to do about it? I read some books. And I think it was back in 2009, I had a crisis in my family of origin, and there was going to be potential changes that I just felt were wrong and not acceptable. Somebody moving to another state, possible divorce, and I became obsessed with trying to monitor this situation, research the situation, fix the people involved, guide the people involved, tell them what they should do. And I became crazy. I don't remember much about my own life. This chaos went on for probably a year and a half. And I was at family members' houses, seeing how are you today, what's new today, what's the latest development. I was losing my own life. I was not involved in my own marriage. I was completely trying to control and fix what I perceived as a problem for other people. And in January of 2011, I walked into my first Al-Anon meeting. I don't even remember how I found the meeting. I don't remember what was said at the meeting. I know there were 5 people there that first time. And I know I cried my eyes out. I remember that there was another newcomer. So 2 out of the 5 of us were brand new. I'm going to close my bedroom door because my dog's barking. Yvonne knows about that, just in case you can hear that. So I go to this meeting. I don't remember the details. I had really no idea what Al-Anon was. But what I remember is that they did some readings there, and the women that were there, it was a women's group, shared things. And the things they said, it was like they were reading my mind. It things that I felt and thought that I was the only one who thought and felt such things. So what I remember is that feeling of connection and belonging, and like I finally found a place where I might find help. And sorry, that it just makes me emotional when I think about that, because that was the beginning of turning my life around. That was 11 years ago. So I was 42, 41 years old. And I started going to that meeting on a regular basis. And I just read the literature and I did what they told me to do. I bought some of the daily readers and a book called How Al-Anon Works. And again, the more I read, the more I identified. And it was probably a year and a half of me attending Al-Anon that I finally asked someone to be my sponsor. And what they say in the programs are that if someone has what you want, then you need to do what they did and do what they do. And a woman spoke at that meeting and just really resonated with me. And so I began my journey with her as a sponsor. And that's truly when my recovery in Al-Anon started and my recovery from the disease of codependency started. What had happened for me is that a lot of dysfunctional behaviors that occurred in my parents as a result of growing up in active alcoholism were modeled and passed down to me and my brother and sister. And that's not to blame them, that's just to say that that's what they knew because of what they grew up in. I was preoccupied with other people and what they did. I was very concerned about making other people happy, pleasing other people, um, having other people do things that I thought were the right choices. I had no idea how to take care of myself, especially emotionally and spiritually. And that's what happens with families of addicts and alcoholics. You know, you've heard the stories of um, how people try everything to get somebody to stop drinking. And in the process of doing that, they lose themselves. They often will end up enabling the alcoholic to keep drinking. And um, rather than learn how to deal with their own behaviors and what's going on within them, all their focus is outside themselves on the alcoholic. And all of my focus for my life was outside of myself. So I began the journey of the 12 steps, which I cannot say enough about. Um, you know, they talk in the programs of AA and Al-Anon about a higher power. They don't say you have to believe in any certain religion, any certain God, anything. But you do have to believe that there is a power greater than you, whatever that may be. And it's one thing I love about the program is that they don't force any kind of religion on you. Um, I grew up in a church. I went to church regularly. I was very involved in church. And what I came to realize is that I knew about God, who I call my higher power. I knew about God, but I had never experienced God. And that's one of the things that the 12 steps has given me. So my sponsor helped me start on the 12 steps. And basically, she suggested that I get a book, read the chapter, answer the questions that followed. And so we did that. Um, we talked about step one and admitting that I was powerless over. Step one says we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. In Al-Anon, we often say we admitted we were powerless over other people, places, and things, and that our lives had become unmanageable. I, before recovery, would not have said my life was unmanageable. I thought I had things under control. But as mentioned, my focus was totally on other people. If they would be okay, then I would feel better. If something went wrong with them, then my life disrupted. And I had to recognize that I was not living in a manageable way. Step two came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And I love step two. I love that it says a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Just have a smidgen of hope that this insane way of living that I've been doing could be removed and restored by a power greater than myself. I love that step to this day. Step 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the power of God as we understood him. And my sponsor and I worked on that step, and we kind of talked about what I found to be my understanding of God, and how I could turn my life over each day and focus on what that power greater than myself wanted from my life, rather than me trying to figure it out all on my own. Step 4 is a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And my sponsor had me do a very in-depth inventory. It's called the Blueprint for Progress. It's just one way that you can do a step 4. But it takes a very detailed look at all kinds of character traits that we have inside ourselves as human beings. And basically, what I was able to do during that process is find out what behaviors worked for me and what behaviors were not working for me, what things that I did or patterns of behavior that I had were not helping the relationships that I was in. It really helped me to get to know myself. Like, who even am I? I was just a lost person. Like I mentioned, that hole in the soul. I just, something was missing from my life that I thought would make me happy and content. And I didn't know what it was. I kept going to therapy. I kept looking for other people. I kept doing what you're supposed to do in life. And the hole persisted. So doing this inventory helped me to just get to know myself and what was there and what wasn't there. And um, in the step after that, you share that information with another human being. And so I did that with my sponsor. And I remember the day I finished that. It was quite a long process, doing those 2 steps. And I shared all the details with her, and a lot of deep, intimate information, you know. And when I got finished with that, I I just remember feeling like a weight. I remember describing it to her as like a plug came out of my heart that was like blocking up all of this trauma and dysfunction. It just came out, and there was just this release and relief. And for me, I remember that as the first time that I experienced the love of God, of a higher power. I didn't just know about God and a higher power, I experienced it, because there she was, just listening to me, good, bad, and ugly, with unconditional acceptance and no judgment. And it was a very powerful moment. Um, so we went on to do the rest of the steps. Um, you then move on to asking God to becoming ready for God to remove your shortcomings. After I did step 4 and 5 and learning about myself, I really got to see some things that were quite painful. Um, Unhealthy ways in particular unhealthy patterns of behavior in relationships. Acting like a victim, expecting other people to read my mind versus me asking or telling them what I need or want. Expecting other people to make me happy instead of me finding ways to get my needs met. Being passive aggressive. Things that might have helped me once upon a time in my life, when um, the dysfunction around me, perhaps growing up, was too much to handle and was all I knew. Perhaps these things worked at one point, but now I started to see a lot of relationships that failed for one reason or another. And this could be romantic relationships, friendships, just acquaintances at school, work, church, whatever. I began to see a lot of relationships that didn't work out, and I was the common denominator in all of them. So the Al-Anon program really makes you take a look at yourself and how can you take care of yourself. And it's often very disappointing for people who come into the rooms and realize that Al-Anon is not about telling you how to get the alcoholic in your life sober. Just like it wasn't about me walking into the rooms and having them tell me, how do I fix this chaos in my family? It wasn't about that. It's not about controlling other people's lives. It's about finding yourself and helping yourself be the healthiest person you can be, um, and realizing that you can't change, you can't fix other people. And in trying to do so, you actually take away the dignity that is theirs to live their own life and to make their own choices. Um, so there can be some very strong awarenesses as you work the 12 steps for sure. Um, but it has been the most powerful, wonderful experience. Um, Moving on, step 8 is making a list of people that you've harmed. And step 9 is making amends to people that you have harmed, except when to do so would injure them or others. So this is kind of about setting the record straight. And they do this in AA. They do the 12 steps in AA too, if they're working a good program. And it's kind of about, clearing out what you did wrong and then trying to do better. Step 10 is continuing to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Trying to live in this new way of recovery now that I am learning. Step 11 is sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him. And you begin to realize as you work any recovery program that the solution to, be it codependency, alcoholism, addiction to food, drugs, gambling, whatever, is more than just stopping that activity. It's about filling the hole in your soul. And that is the spiritual solution. That's what was missing for me, was a spiritual connection to a power greater than myself. And I don't know if that makes sense to people. I don't know if that would have made sense to me before recovery. I just knew I wasn't happy and I felt something was missing from my life. And when I came to realize that having other people do what I want or act the way I wanted or give me what I wanted wasn't going to make me happy, um, I had to look deeper into myself and my connection with God as I understood Him. And then step 12 is having had a spiritual awakening. We tried to carry the message of these 12 steps to others and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So I am coming up on 10 years in Al-Anon. And I really, I look at my life as before recovery and after recovery. I feel like since I came into the rooms of Al-Anon, I, for the first time, am able to learn who I really was, be who I really am, um, find people in my life who I have real, honest relationships with. And it's a whole new level of connecting with people because everyone in those rooms is hurting. And we often say, you often hear it said that while our stories are often different in the details, our feelings are the same. Our feelings, our behaviors, what we just want peace and serenity. It doesn't, no matter what the people around us do. And that's the gift that Al-Anon promises. Whether you're like me, who grew up with not having active addiction and drinking in my family, or you are living or married to an alcoholic, or have someone in your family who is in active addiction, you can still have a happy life. You can still have peace and serenity, and you can have a freedom from the clutch that that disease has on the whole family. It's a terrible disease. It is so insidious. It's so powerful, and it can so easily take down um, so many people in a family. So I encourage any of you who might be listening, if you are dealing with active alcoholism, or if you even have somebody who's in recovery from alcoholism, Al-Anon is for people, friends and family who've been affected by the disease of alcoholism. Just because I didn't live with it doesn't mean I haven't been affected by it. I remember somebody in the program said to me, you know, one time, like, no wonder you had so much trouble finding out what it was for you, Jen. You know, had I had a husband who was drinking, I could have pointed to the bottle and said, that's the problem. That's it. If that would stop, I'd feel better. That's often what families think. I didn't have a bottle to point to. I didn't have anything tangible like that going on around me. I just had the dysfunction that came from growing up in that situation, passed down through different generations to me. And I didn't learn how to develop a healthy self-esteem, a healthy way to interact with other people. And for me, you know, they say that alcoholics or addicts often have to hit rock bottom before they'll look to recovery. And I heard someone share their story in Al-Anon, and you know, we sort of, it's the same thing. You know, we kind of hit a rock bottom that gets us in the door of our first meeting. And I heard her describe it as a gift of desperation. And I love that. I just love that way of putting it because it was desperation that got me in the door. I was just so sad and so hopeless and full of despair. And that's what brings most of us in the door. Um, it's often treatment centers or counselors or um, someone else saying, you really should go to Al Anon because your spouse, child, parent, whoever is in recovery or in treatment. A lot of people go that way because they were told to or instructed to. Um, whether you stay or not, though, makes all the difference. And whether you involve yourself in the program makes all the difference. What is my life like now? I do try to practice the principles of recovery in all my affairs, in my home, in my job, in my relationships. Some days I do it wonderfully. Some days I fail miserably. Most days it's somewhere in between. Um, it's a program that I will go to forever because there will always be more to learn and there will always be opportunities to practice healthier behavior and to learn better ways of dealing with things. Um, there is so much wisdom in the rooms of Al-Anon. There are many people in Al-Anon who also have gone to AA. I have several friends who are in the AA program and now in Al-Anon. And when you think about it, Al-Anon is for friends and family members, people who have been affected by alcoholism. I never understood why more people who are alcoholics aren't in Al-Anon because if anyone's been affected by alcoholism, it's the alcoholic. Um, and I have heard a lot of people who are in AA say that their recovery just kind of got to a plateau or they felt like they needed more. And so Al-Anon was recommended to them as the next step. And it is a beautiful program. It is, I feel that I am learning more and more to connect to the spiritual side of life and to connect to my higher power as I understand him. I feel like I am more and more learning to be accepting and tolerant of other people and their choices, whether I agree with them or not. I am learning to not be as affected by what other people do or say. I'm learning to mind my own business more, to keep the focus on myself. Um, I have made friends who I never thought the level of intimacy in friendship was possible. People who are real, who are done pretending, who are there when they say they're going to be there. Um, it, it's really something I don't feel that I could explain adequately. It's something that you have to experience to know. Um, it's a beautiful program. They say it's a simple program, but not an easy program. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. They, there are so many people who've gone before and they tell you what worked for them. They tell you to keep coming back. And there's always someone in those rooms who has been through what you've been through, who is experiencing or feeling what you're feeling. And knowing you're not alone is one of the greatest gifts. So I am forever grateful to the program of Al-Anon. I have gone to hear AA speakers. I've gone to open AA meetings to hear that side of the alcoholic story, what it's like from them. I didn't understand that the alcoholic couldn't just stop drinking, that it's a disease. I believe that it's a disease. And I often hear alcoholics who speak say that the problems they had were solved when they took their first drink. And I could say, as a child who was so shy and so socially anxious and so scared, if I would have taken a drink and felt the way that they say they felt, that their problems just went away and they could feel confident and didn't have all those worries in their mind, I'd be an alcoholic. Had it worked for me and had the genetics been such that I had the disease, I could see why they say that. For me, the first drinks I took, I ended up getting sick. So wasn't the answer for me. And so I just kept trying to find the answer. I read a billion books. As I said, I went to therapy. I looked for answers outside of myself in another job, another place to live, another boyfriend, whatever it was. Um, and I came to find that the answer is inside of me, and that the 12 steps and the people in those rooms can help me find it. So it is an amazing program, one that you, if you're new to it, probably won't understand for a while, but if you just go and keep coming back, it can change your life and it can really heal your heart. So I think at that point, I will stop, and I thank you for listening and giving me this opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you, Jen. And, there was just so much that you mentioned, that you spoke about, that I was nodding in unison with you,
Mm,
just in agreement. Like I totally appreciate your openness about your life and your thought patterns and what happened, and I'm just thank you for that. I have a couple questions of my own, but this is I want to get the questions out from folks that were tuning in. And Alicia had asked, what was the first book you read, and do you have other recommended literature?
mm. Well, the the book that I read um, that helped me identify that I had codependent behaviors was called Codependent No More. And that is by a lady named Melody Beattie, who has in recovery herself and has done a lot of writing on recovery. So that was my first book um, that I read that helped me identify with the problem. And my first books in Al-Anon were How Al-Anon Works, and there was also a daily reader called One Day at a Time. And those daily readers are wonderful because they give you just little tidbits of information, just enough for the day
Mm.
that just kind of let you start to identify with addiction and codependency and what it does and how you can heal from it. And a lot of the resources are available on the Al-Anon website, which is www.pa.alanon.org.
Okay, great. And then someone asked, I'm thinking it's Alicia, but it might be somebody else. And so excuse me, folks, if I got this next question wrong from the originator. What do you suggest as a next step for those thinking about joining Al-Anon? It's a great question.
Yeah. A lot of our meetings now here in Berks County are virtual. We do them on Zoom. So you can also find those on the Pennsylvania Al-Anon website. And that website would probably also tell you if there are any meetings that are actually meeting in person. I don't know if there are any actual Al-Anon meetings meeting in person, but the Zoom meetings are wonderful. You can join in. Um, you don't have to say anything. You can just listen. They each sort of have their own way of running, but there's a chairperson who kind of guides things along. And most meetings involve some sort of reading, and then they open the meeting up for sharing at that point. So I would encourage you to go to the website, and or you can give my email address, Yvonne, if you think that's appropriate, and I can certainly help to guide people.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I appreciate you being a resource, because I think this is very important. I really appreciate it, Jen. You're speaking from a place of just because I come from the other side of the track, if you will, in AA. And so to have the other piece about Al-Anon, and I heard you talk about trying different things before you landed in Al-Anon. And I didn't hear that part in terms of how you got there. Was that something that was self uh, your own self that you said, maybe I'll try this? Because it seemed like you were on this journey to try and say, what's going on with me and how do I begin to find some sense of connection? Was that your own, or was that a therapist that referred you? Because oftentimes people think, well, I'll wait till somebody says I should go and then I'll go.
Yeah.
Not necessarily their
Yeah.
own, initiation.
Yeah. As I think about that, I think it was from that conversation with a person I was working with at work who was in AA, and she brought up how she thought she was codependent in her relationship with her boyfriend. And I asked her what that word meant. And then I said, well, what do you do even if you are? And I think she's the one who mentioned the Al-Anon program. I had no idea it was even out there. I don't even know. I think I had heard about AA, but I pretty much knew nothing about AA either.
Mm-hmm.
So she put the seed in my mind, and she may have even brought me a paper schedule, which if we were meeting in person, we have printed schedules that you can
Mm-hmm.
see where there are Al-Anon and AA meetings in the Reading area. So she planted the seed, and as I mentioned, when my desperation got that bad,
Yeah.
I walked through the doors. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And did you have the notion that was I in the right place? And if not, when did you know? And I share that because sometimes folks, you talk with individuals and say, "Well, I went to two Al-Anon meetings and I didn't like them, so I haven't gone back since then." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we
Yes.
can use that for any number of mutual support groups. But they'll say, "I went to one or two, thinking that." Aha, the magic moment's there in the first two times. Otherwise, it doesn't work for you, right?
Absolutely. I hear that very often when people share. For me, I felt like I had finally found a place where people understood and were experiencing the same thing that I was. I felt that
Mm-hmm.
my first meeting, and I think that was a blessing. I personally, as I look back on that, think that my higher power guided me to that meeting on that night with another newcomer, to a very small meeting, because I think he knew, had he put me in a big, huge meeting where there was no intimate contact,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have went back. Now I know that we tell newcomers to try at least 6 meetings, and different meetings if you don't feel like the one you went to um, was a connection for you. We
Mm-hmm.
tell people to try at least 6, and I have a friend who says, try at least 6 meetings, and if it doesn't work from you, you can continue in your misery, you
Yeah.
know, because
Mm-hmm.
you different meetings have different flavors. Some are smaller, some are larger. Um, the literature that we follow is different, um, and people get discouraged, I think, when they find out that we're not going to tell you how to get
Yeah.
someone to stop drinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that they think that that's what they're going to find in there. And I think a lot of times people don't come back. And what they don't realize is, by you getting yourself as healthy as you can, your life will be better. And that in turn might help the alcoholic in your life more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when going to meetings, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to say anything. Sometimes,
No.
just as you're first there, this is my first meeting, and I'm just really here to listen and actively listen and take in some of the information that you perhaps can relate to. Maybe
Yes.
something that is very helpful for the individual. Would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. You don't have to share. We often go around and introduce ourselves. Again, meetings are different. Sometimes we just ask that you raise your hand before sharing. Some meetings pass a timer around, and if you don't want to share, you just pass. You just say
Okay.
pass and pass the
Mm-hmm.
timer to the next person.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no pressure. That we often say there are no musts in Al-Anon. And um, many times people listen, and I'll tell you, it's terrifying for most of us to walk in that door the first time,
Yeah.
because first of all, you're at a very desperate place.
Mhm.
And second of all, you don't know what you're walking into, or if it's gonna help, or if it's even the right thing.
Mhm.
Um, so, but yeah, you absolutely can sit and listen, and you can do that for months, and many people do. Many people do.
Yeah. And I think the other piece, and if you wouldn't mind just kind of talking on the importance of it, is that there's work to be done for yourself. Even
Mhm.
if, that husband or that child is still drinking, you can still, those steps are there, and those steps are meant for your own healing, and you talked about that spirituality and the importance of finding a place where you feel comfortable sitting in your own skin to be okay with who you are and where you're at. Can you just kind of talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that, you know, alcoholism and growing up in it usually is very chaotic.
Mhm.
Um, there are usually things that, are not dependable. There's a lot of change and chaos going on. People often don't feel safe physically, emotionally. Um, and a lot of times you're just trying to survive the situation. And in the process of growing up in whether it's active alcoholism or the dysfunction that results from it, um, you lose yourself,
Yeah.
and you don't know how to take care of yourself because you're trying to survive or you're trying to save someone else from dying, and you lose yourself, and you
Mhm.
become insane with that preoccupation. And a lot of times when someone does get sober, family members think that everything will be rosy and peachy. Well, that's not the case all the time. That person
Mhm.
might get sober and find their own recovery, but if you haven't found a way to heal yourself and your own pain that has developed as a result of living in that, then you're going to have the hole in the soul. You're going to be lost, and there's there's just something for everyone in those rooms and in those steps. I truly believe that.
Mhm.
I really do.
And then the other question I sometimes get from folks is in terms of going to meetings. You talked about, and I had a question here, do you celebrate anniversaries? And so thank you for that, because you had mentioned that you had been attending Al-Anon for a significant period of time. Um, and so sometimes people might ask, well, is there an end to this? And how do you respond to that? I mean, I know
Yeah.
from when people talk to me about my disease of addiction with alcohol and going to meetings. And so folks will say, well, when do you stop going to meetings? I have quite a responsive called infinity. That's when I will
Yes.
stop you, right? And so can you just
Yeah.
speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. It's interesting because I think a lot of us set out with that mentality, like, well, I'll go and I'll figure out what to do, and then
Mhm.
I'll be done. And what you come to learn is that it isn't ever done. But I mean, for me personally, the growth that I am making and the friends that I have made and the relationships that I have made, I don't want to stop going. Like it's a new way of life, and it has
Yeah,
totally enriched my life. And
yeah.
for me, what happens to me when I don't go is I slide back into the patterns of behavior that don't work and that make me miserable and that put the focus on the problem instead of the solution, outside of myself instead of inside of myself.
Mhm.
And you'll often hear people say that we call it relapses, just like an alcoholic can pick up a drink again. We could start picking up other people's problems. I'm
Mhm.
all focused on someone else instead of me.
Mhm.
um, it is a way to make your life better, and to connect with people, to really connect with people. And most people who embrace and have found the true spirit of recovery and the peace and serenity that comes from it after living in so much chaos for so long, you don't want to stop going. you know
Yeah. Yeah.
it's too much of a gift.
And you know, and you talked about something, a C word, which I'm going to call community, and the ability to kind of, you know, the 12 step talks about a spiritual awakening and sharing what we've gotten. And so through service, being able to give back and helping individuals is another way to stay connected to, you know,
Absolutely.
by helping others, we really indeed help ourselves. Would you say?
Oh, absolutely. I remember when I first met with my sponsor, and she would early on she would tell me that she gets more from her sponsees than she thinks she gives, and she goes, "You're not going to understand that until you become a sponsor yourself." And she was right. You know, in working with other people and talking with other people, you learn from them and grow yourself, and it makes you focus on and dig deeper into your own recovery and your own truths.
Hmm.
And you know, people, there's a level of honesty, especially with the sponsor sponsee relationship. And really, a sponsor is just somebody in Al-Anon who mentors you and who tells you what worked for her, someone
Hmm.
you call when you are in a bad place,
Hmm.
and when you could use some guidance. Um, the intimacy in that relationship and the level of honesty that you can just tell that person anything, and you don't have to keep hiding and having secrets and making it look like it's okay, is
Hmm.
so freeing.
Yeah.
It's so freeing. And I found that with recovery, I was trying so hard to control things in my life and people in my life. And the only peace that came was when I could finally let them go, let
Mhm.
them live their own lives.
Yeah, yeah. There's a certain level of peace, and I can appreciate what you're saying because I found that for myself, the joy of peace begins when we just let go. And
Hmm.
sometimes they can be so simple as, you know, we think, you know, trying to control the outcomes of, you know, I lost my keys or left my keys and just all those different things. And you know, you just let it go, and it just arbitrary. It just works itself out the way it's
Yeah,
supposed to. Not necessarily in our time, right?
that's right.
But it works out, and there's this
Yeah,
level of peace that comes with that to say it's going to be okay. We don't have to make ourselves go crazy and just self-destruct. But if we just do the next right thing, and that's what I heard you talk about, doing the next
yeah,
right thing, that it works out.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm so appreciative, Jen, for your time with us. And I just kind of want to put out to the Berks County area that this is National Recovery Month. And so we're going to be here again on Thursday evening at 6 o'clock. And we'll introduce you to a young man who has found freedom through medication-assisted treatment. So we hope that you'll join us back here on Thursday evening. And I also want to invite those that are in our earshot that in celebrating National Recovery Month, we invite you to visit our Berks Rise website and give us a 30-second video or a little picture with a caption to let us know what recovery means to you. Recovery, it means freedom for so many different people on so many different levels, but also recovery just means something different for everyone. And we really want to celebrate National Recovery Month by letting folks know that Berks County is living and breathing in recovery. There are approximately 33,000 people in Berks County that are living in long-term recovery from the disease of
Mm,
addiction. And so
wow.
let's hear, let's hear from the walks of life about recovery so that others can get well. That's really part and parcel why we're doing this as well. So thank you all again for joining us. I really hope that we'll see you again on Thursday evening, this Thursday evening, which is the 10th of September at 6 o'clock. And we'll hear from another person who'll talk about their journey and how they got well. In the meantime, it's Tuesday evening. Stay well, stay blessed. Remember, social distancing is a priority for Berks County, and we'll see you on Thursday evening. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.